Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. It started innocently enough, the way a lot of things do. I needed to rehome my cat, Muffin. She'd been with me for almost 5 years. Through breakups, bad jobs, and even the death of my grandmother. She had this sweet way of curling up in my lap, purring when I needed comfort, and I'd always promised her that when I moved into a new place, we'd be okay. But life had other plans. I was moving into a new apartment that didn't allow pets. It wasn't the worst thing, I guess, but it didn't stop the sinking feeling that gnawed at me as I clicked post on that Craigslist ad. Free to a good home. Sweet, loving cat. Must go soon. I added a few cute photos of her. One with her curled up on the couch. Another where she was half asleep with her paw over her eyes and waited. I didn't expect much. The world had grown so impersonal lately. A few replies at best, maybe an offer or two that would fall through. But when the message came, I wasn't prepared for what followed. It was from a man named Tom. He said he had just lost his wife and was looking for a companion. The message seemed so heartfelt. He wrote that his wife had adored cats, and after she'd passed, he couldn't stand the silence in their home anymore. He claimed that Muffin would be the perfect fit for him and that he would love her just as much as she deserved. Something about it struck me as overly sincere, too good to be true, but at the same time, it made my heart ache. I imagined him, alone in his house, surrounded by memories of his late wife, looking for a way to fill the void. I agreed to meet him the next morning. When I arrived at his house, I expected the typical suburban home, neat lawn, small porch. It was the kind of place where families lived, where kids played in the yard and barbecues filled the air with the scent of sizzling burgers on summer evenings. His house was no different. Tom was waiting on the porch, leaning against the railing with his hands in his pockets. He looked normal. Tall, a little slouched in a worn sweater, but nothing unusual. "Hey, you must be the one with the cat," he said with a soft smile, his voice quiet but warm. "Yeah, that's me," I said, trying to keep my tone light. I handed him the carrier with Muffin inside. "She'll be perfect for me," he said as he gently took it from me, like it was a fragile gift. His hands were shaking just a little. "You don't need to worry about her. She'll be well taken care of. She's just perfect." I thought it was odd that he kept saying that word, perfect, but I didn't think too much of it. Maybe it was just grief, I thought. His wife must have been everything to him. Maybe I was projecting too much onto the situation. He handed me an envelope of cash, more than I'd asked for, but I took it without question. He pressed it into my hands with a gentle insistence, almost like he didn't want me to argue. "I appreciate this so much," he said, his eyes locked on the carrier like it was the most precious thing in the world. As I turned to leave, I felt a sudden chill. He said something, just under his breath, but it wasn't a casual comment. It was a whisper, dark and chilling. "You'll never see her again." The words stuck with me like ice in my veins. I paused. Did he mean it as a joke, or something else? I forced myself to brush it off, telling myself it was just a grieving man, someone who'd been through too much, looking for comfort in the form of a pet. But as I walked away, the feeling didn't leave me. It crawled inside me, digging its claws into my chest. I couldn't shake the unease. When I got home, I set the cash on the counter and took a deep breath. I tried to focus on other things, but my mind kept drifting back to that comment. You'll never see her again. That night, as I lay in bed, I found myself thinking about it more and more. I felt the need to look him up, not in a weird, obsessive way, but just to make sure he wasn't some scammer or weirdo who had made the whole thing up. Maybe he wasn't who he said he was. I pulled up his name, Tom Hunter, and Googled it. The first result was an obituary. My heart stopped when I saw the name. It wasn't his wife's obituary, though. It was his. Tom Hunter. He had died 5 years ago, listed as a beloved husband, with a picture of him standing next to his wife, smiling like they were both still alive. But the obituary didn't mention anything about him being alive. It said that he had passed after a long illness. His wife had been gone for much longer than he'd let on. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I stared at the screen. I read the obituary again, and then I searched the address he'd given me. It was the same one that had popped up on my search results. I even cross-referenced it with a map. The house was real, but everything else felt wrong. Something about it didn't match. I could barely sleep that night, and the next day, I tried to reach him again. I sent a text asking if he had any updates on Muffin, but it was marked as delivered without a response. I waited, checked again, and still nothing. Then, just a few hours ago, something happened. I got an email. It was from an anonymous account with no name attached. The subject line read, "She's perfect." The message itself was short, just a few words. She's here. And she's happy. I told you I'd take care of her, but when I clicked on the attached photo, I almost lost my breath. It was a picture of Muffin, but she wasn't in the carrier anymore. She was standing in the corner of a dimly lit room, her eyes wide and unblinking. Behind her, there was a figure standing in the shadows, and I could just barely make out the outline of a man's face. The expression was impossible to read, like he was staring right at me through the screen. And then, beneath it, the words, "She'll never leave me now. I haven't slept since. I don't know what happened to Muffin, but I know I'll never be able to forget what Tom said, or what I saw in that email. There's a part of me that wishes I could go back, get her, and take her home. But another part of me, well, I know I'll never be able to. I can still feel that cold presence lingering in my apartment." Story 2. It was the kind of evening that felt like it belonged to a different world. The kind where the air is thick with humidity and the sky hangs low, a blanket of oppressive gray. My rent had just gone up again, and I was still trying to furnish my new apartment with nothing but scraps of old furniture and a tight budget. You know how it goes. Your place doesn't feel like a home until the couch is just right. I spent hours scrolling through Craigslist, hoping for a miracle. And then, like something out of a dark fairy tale, it appeared. The ad was simple, too simple. Just a photo of an old, worn-out couch with a faint, grainy quality. It had clearly been used for years. The fabric was fraying, the cushions sagging, but it was free, and in my desperation, free was all that mattered. The words beneath the photo were straightforward, but there was something about them that felt almost too perfect. Free couch. First come, first serve. There was a phone number at the bottom, and with little hesitation, I punched it into my phone. The man who replied was named Bill. His message came through fast, almost too fast. He didn't waste time asking questions. Just a quick, simple reply. You can pick it up this afternoon. He was eager. Too eager. But I didn't care. I needed the couch. I needed to make my new place feel like home. And I wasn't about to pass up a free piece of furniture, no matter how worn it looked. I plugged the address into my GPS and drove across town, deep into an area I'd never been before. The farther I went, the more isolated it felt. The houses here were far apart, each one a little more dilapidated than the last. When I finally reached Bill's address, I slowed down and scanned the surroundings. The house was a small, rundown structure sitting at the end of a long gravel road. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and the front porch looked like it hadn't been touched in years. There were no cars in the driveway, no signs of life. I sent Bill a quick text. "I'm here." "Outside." His response came almost immediately. "Come in." I felt the first stirrings of unease in my chest, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a couch after all. What harm could come from that? I stepped out of my car and walked up to the front door, my footsteps crunching on the gravel beneath me. When I knocked, the door creaked open before I could even pull my hand away. Bill was standing there, a broad smile plastered across his face. He looked normal enough with his flannel shirt and jeans, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something hollow there, something that made my skin prickle. "Come on in," he said, motioning me inside. His voice was too smooth, too calm. I hesitated, but then stepped into the dim interior. The air was stale, and the place smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic, something I couldn't quite place. The living room was dark. Thick, heavy curtains were drawn across the windows, blocking out the sunlight. There were boxes piled up in the corners, and the walls were cracked, the paint peeling in places. But in the center of the room sat the couch. The couch. It was exactly like the picture. Too exactly. The same worn-out fabric, the same faded pattern. It looked like it had been in that room for decades. I tried not to let my discomfort show as I smiled politely and walked over to the couch. It was worse up close. Dirt stains, threadbare fabric, and something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The cushion seemed to sag in a way that made me think of old bones, brittle and fragile. Bill was still standing in the doorway, watching me with that unsettling smile on his face. "So, what do you think?" he asked. It's definitely free," I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. He chuckled softly. "You'd be surprised how many people turn down free things." His eyes flickered to the couch, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something dark in them. "Don't worry, though. It's a good couch. Real comfortable." I nodded, though I was starting to feel the first cold tendrils of fear creep into my chest. "Yeah, it looks like it's been here a while." Bill didn't seem to care. He was already moving toward the door a little too quickly for my liking. "I'll grab the keys to the van. We'll get it in there." I stood frozen for a moment, looking down at the couch, then glancing around the room again. Something was off. It wasn't just the house or the way Bill acted. It was the couch. It felt wrong, like it was hiding something. I finally snapped out of my daze and turned to follow him outside. He was standing by an old, rusted van in the driveway, holding a set of keys out toward me. As I walked closer, my foot kicked something small in the dirt. It was a scrap of paper, crumpled and torn. I bent down to pick it up, and as I did, I saw it. What I thought was a shadow moving in the corner of my eye. Something dark. Something crawling across the side of the van. I froze again, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Here," Bill said, holding out the keys. "Let's get the couch in the van." But my eyes were locked on the van, and that's when I saw it. At the very edge of the van's side door was a small smear. A faint, dark stain that didn't quite look like rust. I squinted, my stomach sinking. The stain was too fresh, too dark. I glanced back at Bill, who was already heading toward the door. He turned, looking at me like I was a little slow to catch on. "You know," he said, his voice suddenly unnervingly calm, "that couch has seen a lot. Some people can't handle it. But you're strong, right? I'm sure you'll be fine." I didn't even know what he meant by that. My heart was hammering in my chest as I turned and walked back toward the front door. "Wait," I began, but then I saw it. A small, faint red stain on the edge of the couch. I wasn't imagining it. It was blood, fresh blood. I could see the dark streaks of it, as if something or someone had been dragged across the fabric. I turned and ran. My breath was coming in ragged gasps as I sprinted to my car, ignoring Bill's confused shouts behind me. I didn't stop until I was back home, slamming the door shut behind me. The phone buzzed. It was a text from Bill. "Don't worry. It's just a little blood from the last person who didn't take it when I offered." I stared at those words, my heart racing. For the first time, I wondered if I'd made it out of there in time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside, made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still following me. And every time I closed my eyes, I could hear Bill's voice in my head, soft and cold. "It's just a little blood. Don't worry. I still don't know who the last person was or what happened to them, but I'll never look at free furniture the same way again." Story 3. It was a simple thing, really, just a mirror, or so I thought. I was fresh into my new house, feeling the weight of it all. The mortgage, the moving boxes, the faint promise of a life that could be better, could be quieter. The house was old, old enough to have some history that no one could remember, but still, there was something comforting about its bones. I didn't mind it. I was looking for a way to make it feel like home. Then I saw the ad. Antique mirror, ornate frame, perfect for any home. The price was ridiculously low. Too low, really. It was one of those things that made you suspicious, but also gave you a glimmer of hope. A piece of furniture that could make a space feel, I don't know, different. It seemed too good to be true. I had just moved in, after all, and a beautiful mirror in the hallway could be the one piece that tied it all together. The photo was grainy, taken in a dimly lit room, but I could tell the mirror had character, a history. It wasn't just a flat piece of glass. The frame was carved with intricate patterns, twisting vines and flowers that seemed to reach out toward you, even in the photo. There was something magnetic about it, something that made my fingers itch to touch it. It looked old, genuinely old, and I knew it would look perfect in the hall, reflecting the soft evening light that filtered through the windows. The seller, a woman named Linda, said she needed to get rid of it quickly because she was moving. She didn't go into details, just said she was selling a few things before her move. I called her that evening, and we arranged for me to pick it up the next day. When I arrived at her house, I immediately felt a strange sensation, something I couldn't quite place. The house was tucked away at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, but there was something off about it. It looked abandoned, as though it had been standing there for decades without anyone paying it much attention. The windows were covered with heavy, dark curtains, and a musty smell wafted from the door when she opened it. Linda stood in the doorway with a forced smile on her face. Her robe was old and stained, and her hair was pulled back into a messy bun that looked like it hadn't been touched in days. She didn't look like someone who was in the middle of a move. In fact, she didn't look like she had moved in years. But she welcomed me in any way, with a slow, deliberate motion that seemed almost rehearsed. The living room was small, cluttered with boxes, some unpacked, some still taped up. There was an uncomfortable stillness in the air, like everything inside that house was holding its breath, waiting for something. And then there it was, leaning against the wall like a forgotten relic. A mirror. I knew instantly it was the one from the ad. It was stunning, almost hypnotic. The frame was carved with dark wood, twisting patterns of vines and flowers that looked alive. The glass itself was slightly cloudy, as if it had witnessed too many years, too many lives. But it wasn't just the mirror that grabbed my attention. It was the reflection. I don't know how to explain it, but the reflection in the mirror wasn't right. The room looked wrong, darker, more expansive, like the space was stretched out, pulling at the edges of the walls. The colors were muted, and the shadows seemed to move on their own, twitching in the corners. The light in the room, the soft light from the windows, was dimmed by something unseen. I could feel my heart pick up pace. Something about it felt wrong, like this mirror wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to exist in this space. I shook it off though. It was an antique after all. Old things had their quirks. Linda watched me closely, her eyes flicking back to the mirror, then back to me. Her smile was tight, like she was forcing it, as though she knew something I didn't. "It's a family heirloom," she said, her voice unsteady. "Been in the house for generations. Strange things have happened with it." But she shrugged, her smile faltering. "It's just an old piece of furniture, right?" I didn't know what to say. Her words didn't make sense. I didn't ask her what she meant by strange things. I should have, but I was already too caught up in the pull of the mirror, too eager to take it home. I handed her the money, and she practically shoved the mirror into my arms. I left quickly, as though the house were pushing me out. When I got home, I hung the mirror in the hallway, just as I had imagined. The light from the front door filtered through the space, casting long shadows across the floor. For a moment, everything felt perfect. The house finally had a center, something to ground it. But that night, oh God, that night, it all changed. I woke to loud banging noises, sharp and insistent. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, eyes wide in the darkness. I could hear it, coming from the hallway. I stumbled out of my room, half asleep, trying to shake off the dread creeping up my spine. And there it was, the mirror. But something was wrong. The reflection wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, the shadows playing with my tired eyes. But no, it wasn't a trick. The figure in the mirror was standing there, staring back at me with hollow eyes, a twisted grin spreading across its face. Its clothes were old, ragged, like something out of another time. I froze. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. My legs were lead. I didn't want to look away, but I couldn't bear to keep staring at the thing that wasn't me. And then it moved, not my reflection, the thing in the mirror. It stepped closer, reaching out toward me with long, bony fingers, its grin widening. It was smiling at me with something dark and knowing. I ran. I ran through the house, the thing in the mirror following me with every step. No matter where I went, it was there, staring at me, grinning. The mirror seemed to stretch out, growing in size, its reflection consuming the walls. The room that once seemed so normal was now an endless void. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get rid of it. I drove back to Linda's house, my hands trembling on the wheel. But when I got there, the house was empty. There was no sign of Linda, no sign of anyone living there. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, my thoughts scattered. The mirror, I couldn't keep it. I couldn't leave it there either. So I did what I had to do. I threw it in a dumpster. I thought that would be the end of it, but it's not. I still feel it. Sometimes when I look into a window or a glass surface, I catch a glimpse of something behind me, a figure standing just out of reach, its hollow eyes locked onto mine, its grin still spreading, and I know it's still waiting. It's just biding its time, and I can't shake the feeling that it's always there, watching, waiting for the right moment to show up again.